Occupy like overgrowth, expansive as lungs, snug within a patterned rib cage. Occupy as in belong.
Hi, my name is Sarah. I use they and she pronouns, and I'm here on behalf of the library of Pima County Public Library. And I'm here with Dominique and Sean. Would you two be able to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Dominique Holley. I am the director of the Driftwood Quintet. We're a chamber ensemble that's based mainly in the Metro Phoenix area. And we perform a wide variety of music, ranging from traditional classical music to contemporary classical music to pops music, which would be kind of like video games, movie, TV shows. And we also do a lot of collaborative based work, oftentimes with singers. And this current project with Sean was our first journey into performing with a live poet.
Hey, I'm Sean Avery Medlin. I'm a poet, musician, and teaching artist here in the Valley, Phoenix, Arizona, primarily. Um, I've had the opportunity to work with Driftwood over the years for many, many years now, starting way back, I believe, in I want to say like 2019, um, with this thing called the Poetry Orchestra. Um, that was a series at the Film Bar in Phoenix, combining orchestra music or chamber music with local poets. That's the first time I got to work with Dominique and many of the musicians who have been in Driftwood or currently in Driftwood. And it's really been a treasure. It's my first time doing a poetry collaboration like this. As a musician, I primarily make rap music, so I'm very used to being recorded and um, writing lyrics, just sort of um, music 101. But in terms of setting my poetry to chamber music specifically, that was a brand new experience for me, and it was really rewarding.
Incredible. Thank you so much for your introductions. My first set of questions um, are how did you approach blending spoken word and chamber music together? What was your collaborative process? And also, what was your recording process like?
Yeah, so I'll kind of go off what Sean mentioned a second ago was how when we first met, it was back many years ago. There's a new music organization in Arizona called Oh My Ears, and they had an ongoing series at the now defunct Film Bar called the Phoenix Poetry Orchestra. Driftwood wasn't part of that, but that orchestra used different musicians in the valley. So oftentimes, different members of our group took part in in those performances. And oftentimes, for me as like the programming director for Driftwood, whenever I notice something that I think would be a fun project for Driftwood itself down the line, I kind of always just kind of make a mental note and wait for a time when that project would be viable. So we did that project with Sean. It was recorded. It was written by Driftwood, our then clarinetist's husband, who is a composer. He and Sean worked closely together and wrote that music. And then sometime later, when I was putting together a project for Driftwood, I wanted to use poetry. My first thought was, that project with Sean worked really well. Kevin is a great composer, Kevin Kerr. So I kind of revisited that, and then a lot of times these projects they evolve over time. They take a lot of time to kind of develop and ruminate. So we did one season. We did just half of this EP that was written by Kevin's music, and then the next season we wanted to make it a little bit longer because I think with Kevin's it was just 10 to 15 minutes. And then so our bassoon player Ben actually jumped in next and wrote the rest of the music that went along with Sean's work. So that that was a long process, from pre-COVID times to the first season doing half of it, the next season doing the other half, and then eventually, I believe it was last year, maybe the year before that, where we actually sat down and said, "Cool, we've performed this enough, we've workshopped this enough in live settings and in rehearsals that we feel comfortable sitting down and recording." So we sat down with one of our friends. We did a little home studio session, which I feel is probably not uncommon for a lot of rappers. A home studio. Because I know we Driftwood, we were a classical music group. So for us, generally when classical performance ensembles record, they're in a recording studio with the booth and all that, with like a sound engineer and all those things. So it was really fun to try to have this approach where it was kind of more of almost like a DIY recording setup in our bassoon player's living room. So it was really cool to put that together. And then once we had that, we did the EP, did the house show release, and I don't know, the rest is kind of history. But yeah.
Yeah. Dom summed it up really wonderfully. I just wanted to add just like a few details about what it was like to work with Kevin and Ben. They're both, great composers. So they were both able to write the music, or sort of like a demo, so to speak, of the music in like GarageBand, and send that to me so that I could essentially practice the poem to this uh, digital rendition of what the group might sound like. And then that's kind of how we worked out the kinks. That's how we knew we needed to extend this section, or we needed to completely take out this section, or scrap that idea for a new idea, etc. But with both of them, it was a pretty fast process. No more than a month of back and forth, sending tracks, voice notes, recordings back and forth, and then finally getting in the room with Driftwood with the sheet music to try it with the actual band. So it was very, very collaborative. But like Dom said, yeah, both times I was basically working one-to-one with each composer separately until we were ready to play with the whole group.
Yeah, and it was really interesting because with one big question when you're recording an album is like, what order are we going to put these tracks in? And initially, you'd think, yeah, we'll do Kevin's pieces on one half, Ben's on the other half. But I think since Sean's pieces, Sean's poetry is kind of the through line for all this. It actually worked really well to mix and match the order of the pieces, because just like any artist, Kevin and Ben have very different writing styles, and even within their own writing styles, there's different things they lean on for different types of pieces that they write. So it's really interesting to see, Kevin's music, which often can tend to be a little bit more lean towards contemporary classical aesthetics, which means it can be a little bit more dissonant, it can be a little less straightforward. And then he also has another style where he writes really, really beautiful harmonies, and some melody sometimes. And then you go towards Ben's musical writing, which is very much more influenced by pop music, I think. So there's, it's very much more straightforward as far as the harmony and the melody. Those are really interesting, but it's very much based in the harmonic language that the average person would be more familiar with. So when you mix and match those movements, it really helps the album flow and keep the listener engaged.
Very interesting. Out of curiosity, when you met together as a live group, as opposed to passing the recordings back and forth, did you notice you had to make any changes?
Dom, I'll let you take this one because I can speak to it, but I think you can speak to it with more detail.
Yeah, it's interesting because I really like the idea of music being fluid and not so static. And what I mean by when I said it is that every time you sit down to play something, it's more interesting for us as the performers if it's a little different every time. So one of the big things for that we at least the way that Driftwood has approached poetry and more or less through composed music is we know we have different markers in our music for when you listen for certain lyrics, certain parts of the text. Oftentimes Ben or Kevin would write vamps into the music, so we know okay we when we hear if we have not heard this text yet, there's a vamp here where we can repeat this section until we hear that text. And as musicians, we're not robots, so we don't always play things. We aim to play things similar tempos, but that doesn't always happen. And same thing for Sean. Sometimes Sean will perform something, and in a certain moment, he might be feeling it a little bit faster, he might be feeling it a little slower. So we're always trying to meet and match each other. And it's funny how sometimes in some performances, Sean would be like, "Yeah, I read this stanza 3 times, because you guys took too long, or maybe I started a little later this time, or like, oh yeah, this time I jumped to the end because and what's really cool about working with Sean is that he's not just in his own world; he's listening to us, so he's actively listening as he's performing, so he knows that okay, well I know normally they would be playing something like this during this section. So I know he'll recognize that we're ahead or behind, and he'll adjust accordingly. So I think that's really cool. So like, to answer your question, in that first rehearsal setting, it's in most of the rehearsals, it's just getting that back and forth familiarity cemented in.
I do just want to hop in real quick. I like to talk. But it's really cool because I don't read or write music myself. So it's really cool to be in the room with Driftwood and rehearsals because they're just stop and they have this whole conversation about the sheet music and like what to add here and what to take out here. And I oftentimes don't I know what they're talking about until I hear it. But it is a really just kind of special moment. I like to try to absorb everything in the space and try and learn over time, like what they mean when they say certain things. So it's definitely, like I think I said in the beginning, like it's a unique experience.
Yeah, and it's funny because now you saying that made me realize that in chamber music, music where there's a group of players performing, whether it's a duo, trio, quartet, or a quintet. In our situation, everything we do is very much vocal when we're planning things. We say, hey, you took that too fast. You were too loud. We need to be softer here. So everything we do is very vocal. But then Sean, um, it's not. I feel like there's more internal processing that happens since, as a poet, he's like with his from his poetry side. When he's processing, okay, well, how do I want to exclamate this? How do I want this to feel? So it's like he's getting thrown into the middle of our cross in rehearsal. He gets thrown into the middle of our cross examination of each other when we're fine tuning how we want to do things. So
Very cool. That's making me think of a lot of things because chamber music is so collaborative as opposed to like an orchestra having a conductor kind of decide. You guys kind of have equal voices in deciding how things go. Um, and even in the moment, I'm curious about um, different performances and how they vary. Do you find yourself responding to the audience based on the setting and who they are?
Yeah, I'll answer first, Dom, if that's okay.
yeah, that's
I
definitely
know.
Sean's job because he's speaking. He's like we're speaking through music, but he's actually using words at people. So like he has more control over that, I think, to some degree than we do. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like Don said, I'm definitely always reading the crowd in terms of what they're responding to, what they're not responding to. And that helps me decide, um, sort of like Dom was saying, like my pace, my intonation, what I put emphasis on, if I want to, repeat a certain line a certain time. So yeah, now that we're talking about it, I kind of am balancing almost three different things, right? Like the music that the quintet is playing, um, the audience response, which is like important, but it's not the most important to be honest. But then I'm also balancing where I'm at in the moment, my own feelings, how I feel about the poem, how I feel on that day, if I really want to yell this part like I usually yell it or not, all of those things, just kind of balancing them all and um, making sure that like my ultimate goal is to like be as in tune and as aligned with the quintet as possible, so that our timing is um, and synchronous, in terms of we know which sections or which sections of the song should sound like, or what each section of the song should sound like. So that is sort of the highest priority when I'm performing, is like, what is the quintet doing? And then probably my own feelings second, and then the audience third.
Awesome. Well, I do have a question about how the music and words relate, just to get maybe a gauge on what you think, how you would describe the music. Would you say that the relationship between the two is a literal translation or something more interpretive?
Yeah, I feel like that's a question for Sean a little bit, because when we're looking at the titles of the pieces, and because I wasn't there when Sean was in the woodshed with Kevin and Ben, but I'm curious about Sean, when you were putting this together, and how are you, and you were getting those garage band tracks, how are you I don't know, interpreting and giving feedback for the music, with your texts and like the titles and things.
Like you said it earlier, Dom. Ben and Kevin are two different writers, conceptualized differently. So for both of them, I tried to give them so I'd obviously give them the text. I'd give them a audio recording of me performing it, sort of being like, this is the general tempo, the general pace, the general emotionality that I performed this with. And then I'd also give them some notes, like simple notes, like this should be a mostly upbeat song, or like this would be great if it was a bit dissonant. This would be great if there was a lot of melody. This would be great if there was some harmonies. Just kind of more general direction for them to take it. But each of them really took it in their own complete ways. Like one really cool thing about Ben, Dom also mentioned, is that Ben knows a lot of pop music, and is actually fairly, I would say, like a fairly adept student of hip hop. So working with Ben, actually, there's one specific song where Ben was able to interpolate um, the melody of like a specific rap group, like a specific Southern rap group, right? Just something that like is not in Kevin's wheelhouse, right? But on the flip side, working with Kevin, Kevin was able to pull from um, contemporary Black composers, and use some of their work to inspire what he was writing. So I think that they both try to really write something that is like a response, or like a match to what I'm doing in the poem. So I think it's all kind of an interpret. I mean, You asked about translation versus interpretation. I think it's like both. It's like both and, you know. It's responding and it's also adding on.
Yeah, I feel like hearing that it makes me feel like they both are trying to be like some sort of, in a sense, mirrors to your text, but like they're like the mirror that they're using is uniquely them. So like it like if we swapped these pieces, and they wrote the pieces for the other poems that the other person did, they'd be completely different, because like you said, like the a way that they both came to the idea of like sampling in music, where Ben, I think it was in the trap, how to make trap music. Um, Ben took the idea of sampling and found that song and like remixed it and put it into that movement. And then Ben in the I mean Kevin in the idea of sampling, he's like, oh cool, well Sean is referencing rappers and musicians, and then Kevin's way of mirroring that was to find black composers that he was inspired by and work those melodies into the songs. So yeah.
Very cool. I love how, in the end, not only was this a thinking about Sean's music, but also a contribution of each person's voice and referencing and contextualizing the words as well. Kind of in the same vein, my last question is, what themes emerged as a result of this collaboration?
Yeah, I'll let Sean
Yeah,
take that since it's his poetry. Yeah.
yeah. I saw this question in the email and it really gave me pause. I think this is something that for the end of the process, Kevin was not actively working with us because Kevin had already written his portion and is not an active member of Driftwood. So it's really me and Ben, and then we also let Dom into our like work sessions to help put together like the final track list and the title and everything. And when we were talking about all the pieces, I mean, some major themes are just definitely like the Black experience for sure, is a major theme. Um, I think another theme that's pretty important throughout is like this idea of um, some ideas about youth, right? About like this process of like becoming a person and all of these um, social forces that are shaping and pushing us certain directions. Another big theme, as cliche as it might sound, is kind of like love. Um, what like different kinds of love, right? Like there's familial love in the EP. There's self love in the EP, and there's also like a deep interrogation, specifically in one piece called Siren Call, a pretty deep interrogation of what intimate love is and how to best show up um, for like the intimate physical side of love. Um, and then another theme is actually like literally the title, Echoes. When I was when me and Ben were trying to come up with the title, I just decided to look for the word that repeated the most in every poem. And the word that popped up the most was actually the word echo or echoes. For some reason, I was using that word a lot in these pieces. Um, and I think that it makes sense because everything that we're talking about, from like the historical experience of being Black, like that has a literal sort of echo throughout time, where the past is still very much heard and felt in the present, right? Or thinking about what I was speaking about in terms of adolescence, growing up, right? The things that you experience as a young person, um, they shape who you are throughout the rest of your life, right? Those experiences kind of echo throughout um, the rest of your time here um, on this place called Earth. And so, yeah, I think that like echoes is a bit more abstract of a theme, but it is literally a word that you hear multiple times in or in the project as a whole. And I thought that was really important and powerful and how we arrived to the title.
Yeah, and the word echoes, like to go off of that, it's a word that works on many levels for us because when you think of the from the perspective of music and sound, echoes, music is vibration, echoes are vibrations that are repeating, and there's even times where that idea of echoes is used, like in the last track, which is the title track, which is funny, because oftentimes title track might be earlier on or first, but this time the final track is the title track, and instead of being the whole quintet, it's just Sean, myself, and Ben. It's just three of us, the poet and two instruments, and in the instrument part, we're Ben and I are just kind of echoing each other, literally, like in the musical sense, and the idea in that movement, it's Ben will say something and then I'll say it back musically, and it's not always the same. Sometimes I repeat musically what he did exactly. Sometimes the part that I repeat is longer. Sometimes it's shorter. Um, so I think that's a good way to end it because it really does a good job of encapsulating how we affect and interact with each other. It's not always in the 1-to-1 ratio that we think it might be. I do a good thing for you, you do a good thing for me. Sometimes you do a good thing for someone, they forget about it. Maybe it comes back around years later, maybe it doesn't. Maybe you do something, you wrong someone in a certain way, but you know what? They don't take that personally, and they come back and they help you in a way that you weren't expecting. So it's like this thing is like life is not so straightforward. We can't always know what to expect, or even if we're going off of past experiences. So
It's really beautiful. Are there any last thoughts that you want to share about echoes, about your experience working together, or even what audience may could anticipate before they come to the show? What kind of things they might want to listen or look out for?
I'm not sure. I mean, I'm always when I'm going to go see a new artist, I'm always on the fence of whether or not I should binge all of their music or come with fresh ears. And I think in the sense of this EP, I'm sure there'll be a different experience, because it's available to stream everywhere. If you wanted to help support us, you can, you purchase it on Bandcamp or so you could listen to it beforehand, get familiar with the music, and then come to the live show and experience how things are different in the live setting. Or you could come with fresh ears and not know what you're what you're going to be in store for. And I think that's a journey all on its own. So, yeah.
One thing I just wanted to add as a poet is that some of the pieces in Echoes are from my collection of poetry and essays, 808s and Other Worlds, Memories, Remixes, and Mythologies. Other poems are um, poems that were published other places, online magazines, things of that nature. But there is rather one specific piece, which is Echoes, that I wrote just for the EP to help tie it all together. Sort of after I discovered that echoes was already in almost every poem anyway, like the word echo or echoing. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna write a whole piece called Echoes, um, and just tie it all together. And it was really maybe the only time, one of the only times in my experience putting together a project where I felt like I was really able to put a bow on the ending. Like I was really able to be like, oh, that's what needs to happen, and just like execute it. This is really rare, I feel like, for a creative process. So it was a special moment.
And it's funny because, I remember when Sean wrote Echoes, he's like, "Hey guys, I got one more, I got one more for you." And we're like, "Okay, how many weeks are we out from the first performance?" But it's funny that that last piece was written in such a natural way because the first track, Driftwood, was another piece that was written. Yeah, I know. Yeah, because the Driftwood, we were doing a project with Sean before the Echoes project was, came to full fruition. And I remember Driftwood was, I think we were at a performance at it might have been the Onyx Art Gallery. And Sean was waiting while we were performing other tunes. I think that was when he penned penned Driftwood. He's like, "Hey guys, I wrote this piece inspired by the." So it's like the EP is bookended by two um, spontaneously created poems in reaction to the work itself. So
Yeah, thank you for that correction. I don't know how I forgot about Driftwood, but
because it
like the
happens so
first one.
naturally and it works so well,
Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for doing this interview and sharing your experiences and your beautiful words. Um, and you will be performing at the Murphy Wilmot branch of the Pima County Public Library on February 7th from 3 to 4 p.m. And then afterward, there'll be like a signing merch kind of moment. Um, let's see. I am so excited to hear you guys perform. And do you want to plug any socials, anything like that before we go?
Oh well, I know Driftwood is pretty easy to find out in the internet. If you just search Driftwood Quintet, you'll always find us. Our most active means of communicating and updating people about updates for shows or in future shows and releases is our Instagram, which is just at Driftwood Quintet. Um, we, like I mentioned, we do a lot of projects throughout the year, so there's always something new. If you're in the Phoenix area, next week we're going to be performing with Sean at actually the day before the Tucson event. We'll be at the Phoenix Art Museum for their First Friday event, doing a similar but different show. So, in case you wanted to drive up and down, or in case you're thinking about if you live in Phoenix and you're thinking about going up to Tucson, you could stay an extra day, catch a show, then catch us again in Tucson. But yeah.
Yeah, I can plug some socials always. You can find me, you can find most of my work just through a Google search, my full name, Sean Avery Medlin. I should pop it right up. But I also am pretty active on Instagram. I use that to communicate with most people who follow me. It is at Black Venetian, Venetian VENUSIAN. Um, and I also have a website if you'd like to check that out, which is www.superseanavery.com. So between the website and the Instagram, you should be able to find all of my work, find the Echoes EP, my previous music, as well as links to where to purchase 808s and other ones.
Awesome. Thank you. And I really appreciate it.